You should be able, yep. Welcome, David and Joshua. We're going to give everyone another minute or two to get logged in here and get settled before we kick off the webinar. Now, while we're waiting for the attendees to go ahead and, or additional attendees to get logged in and settled in, for those of you who have already joined, if you have any questions prepared or any questions that you want to ask, feel free to go ahead and throw those into the chat feature of Zoom. So if you hover over the bottom panel, you should see a button that says chat, and you can send those questions directly through chat. You can also post them using the Q&A button as well. Or you can raise your hand and I can, call on you. You can come off mute and ask that question. Or feel free to come off mute at any time and add any comments or questions. All right, with that being said, I just want to welcome everyone to today's Lunch and Learn. We do host these every week, Monday through Thursday from 12 p.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern. And this is a place where you can come to get any questions answered. Now, I see we do have a question from Josh. Is there a way to have a drop down in a form, have something pre-selected based on the flow? Yes, absolutely. Great question, Josh. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and open up a decisions instance and we'll walk through putting that together. Now, is this some? Oh, go ahead.
First of all, I'm in version 6, first of all, so that'd be helpful. And also the data that would be first showing on the form would be coming from an entity already. So we've saved, a value, and now we're coming back in to edit the value, and we want to have that drop down pre-selected with the entity's value.
Okay. Now let me see if I can locate a version 6 server.
Okay. If not, I think it's probably not too different. So
yeah, it'll be exactly the same steps.
Okay, fine. So then let's not waste any time.
Cool. So what I'll do, I'll go ahead and let's create that form, and we'll just add a drop down to it. And from this form, I just want to make sure I understood that correctly. I'm just going to call this drop down example. You are using a, oh, come on. You are using a flow to populate the options in the drop down, but then you also want to have, the option that's already selected populated based on
Correct.
something else. Okay.
Yeah, I have a flow hitting a database that gives me all the options in the drop down, but I also have that saved value from, I could possibly have a saved value, coming in, and they would like to have, one of those options from the flow that gives me the options to be, selected, so that when we're editing, the values, we don't lose them and become a blank, because that would be bad.
Yeah, sure. So we can walk through this. I'm just quickly going to build a flow that is
Okay.
just going to go pull all the accounts in the system. So that way, we can have the same
Mhm.
setup here. So let me build that quickly here. Now, have you already tried this and you're running into issues, or you're just wondering if this is
I didn't see any documentation on how to do this, and
gotcha? No problem.
I might have tried once on a small scale version, but I got sort of
Yeah, no
confused
problem.
and yeah,
Cool.
sorry.
No, you're fine. I just want to make sure I wasn't,
Yeah.
gonna walk through something you already tried. So let me go ahead. We're gonna fetch all of the accounts. We're gonna pass all of them out. All right. So now what we'll do is we'll go ahead and drop this into a flow. Let me change this data name real quick. So the selected item is going to be we'll just call this selected account. All right, so we'll go ahead, we'll drop this in a flow, and we'll just kind of use a constant value as our input just to kind of show a pre-selected one. But if you're comfortable with mappings and decisions, you can use the same concept with select from flow if that
Yep.
value is coming from your flow. Okay, perfect. All right, excuse my spaghetti lines here. All right. So with that, your input is going to be that account that you're looking for. So here, what I'll do, I'll go ahead and I'll just pick one of the accounts we have in our system. So now when I debug this, that input is going to tell this dropdown which selection to display. Now you can still come in here and override it and change it. So maybe I actually wanted Elise selected. I can do that. Does that
Okay.
Is that what you
Yeah.
were looking to accomplish, or did I just
Yes. Yes.
oversimplify it? Okay.
No, that's fine. Okay, I have to go do some debugging on my own to figure out why it's not selecting for me.
Okay. If you run
Okay.
into
Yep.
any
I
issues,
will.
if you want to do that, let me know and you can pop back off mute and we can work it out.
Okay. Great. Yeah. Let's see if anybody has other questions because I think I have two more.
Sure. Let's see. I did have a question come in from David on the display field. Is there a way to concatenate the two fields together with a merge editor or something like that? David, that is a great question. Unfortunately, in the properties panel of this dropdown, that is not currently a feature that we offer. However, with some clever engineering, you can concatenate it inside of the flow itself. However, what comes with that is your type is going to be a string. It's not going to be an entity or that entire entity. So if you need that entire entity selected and passed around as an object in your flow, what you can do is you can use that string after they've selected it to go fetch the entity to pull it into your flow if you need to work with that object. Does that make sense, David, or do you kind of want to? We can kind of walk through building it.
Yeah, kind of. So I guess in order to get that list populated from something, I guess I would have to. I guess I would have to fetch those entities or those objects first, and then transform them into a string, and then refetch it again in order to be able to do something like that.
Yeah. Yep. Now that is actually that is something that has come up recently as well. So that I think that is or recently from another customer as well. So maybe this is something that we can get in front of our development team and see if that's a feature that they can work on.
Gotcha. Cool. No, you don't have to go through building it unless nobody has any other questions and we have a bunch of time left over, but yeah, I get it. Is that something that I can submit a ticket for as a feature request to have something like to have them take a look at that.
Yes, absolutely. So I believe from your, and I might be wrong. I'm sorry, I'm not on the kind of support side of the house, but I believe you can actually submit a support ticket and have a support team member put in that feature request for you, or
Gotcha.
they might have updated the portal where feature requests can be submitted by customers. Now, do you have access to submit dev tickets or any DTs already?
Pretty sure.
Okay, so what you can also do is you can submit that and you can kind of notate in the beginning of the subject, like this is a feature request rather than like an issue that you found.
I gotcha. Yeah, for sure. Cool.
Yeah. Oh, wait, David with Inertia?
Yeah.
Hey, David, I didn't even, took me a while to put 2 and 2 together.
No worries.
All right, let me check to see if we have any other questions. And it doesn't look like we have any questions that have come in so far. So I guess, David, what we can do, let's go ahead and.
No, oh, wait, no, yeah, so
oh,
I just,
that's right.
I just,
You had 2
yes.
questions. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Because-
Goldfish memory.
Yeah, sorry. Is there a way to give a warning before you X out of a form that's displayed?
To give like if you click a button, you want to say, are you sure you want to
no, so
exit?
there's like when a form displays as part of a flow, there's an X in like the upper right hand corner that says close it out.
Gotcha.
Is there a way to give a warning before, like, are you sure you want to do that?
Gotcha. Yeah, so on that actual kind of bar at the top, there's not a way to add an action to those particular buttons, but you do have the ability to hide that top action bar. And what you can do is you can just add your own close button that can have that warnings.
Right. So how do you disable the?
Yes, that is
the top bar?
A great question, and let's do some clicking and find it. I can never remember it off the top of my head, but after a few clicks, I can usually find it. So I believe it might be under, and Liam or Kevin, if you guys know this, feel free to come off mute and answer. And in the meantime, before I start clicking away, let me also send a message to our team. And it might actually be at the flow level now that I'm thinking about it. I believe if I can't find it right off the bat, I will send you some documentation on it. Set for, here we go. Okay, so this is going to set that action bar across the top for every form in your flow. So you'll have to do this, just once on the flow. All the forms inside of it will inherit this behavior, but you would just change the height from 72 to 0.
Okay.
Oh, my numlock. There we go. And that will completely hide the bar.
Okay, so that's on. How do I get to that menu one more time?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So you would just right click on the flow itself.
Okay, gotcha.
Hover over manage, and then it's set forms title style.
Okay, great. Okay.
Cool. And you had another question.
Yes. So once the flow is over, right? So I trigger the flow from a report, a line in a report. It's an action or. Is there a way once the flow is over to refresh the report? Because for some, I think it used to do it, but for some reason it stopped. Refreshing once it was over. So I want to know if there's like a way to do that.
Sure, absolutely. So the flow that's being kicked off from that action, We'll just
Mhm.
pretend this is the flow. Inside of that, do you have a send folder change event step added?
No.
Okay, so
Okay.
this, oh, go ahead.
I know I found something called refresh and I didn't do it. So
Gotcha. So there's actually two places where you kind of have to set this up. So the first
Okay.
thing is you have to tell your flow when and where you want, or what dashboard you want to be refreshed, and at what point in your flow you want to be refreshed. So
Okay.
when you add this step, you can just put in the folder ID for that dashboard. Now that's part one, that's the flow telling the component or the report to refresh. But
Yeah.
on the actual dashboard itself or that report component, you have to turn on the listening. So if let me go ahead and just open up a dashboard here. We'll go to the edit page. And then the setting that you want to click here is if you go to behavior and scroll down a little bit, it will be under the refresh category. And then what you want to check is on, what I usually check is on any folder change, just to cover my bases. I'll also check any contained entity change. So if an entity inside
Okay.
of the report changes, it'll refresh.
Great.
So if you have
So
any
I have to
issues
do,
with that,
but
let me.
I
Oh,
have
go
to do
ahead.
both. I have to do both. You're
Yes.
saying.
Mhm,
Okay.
Yep. So one
I will.
of the parts, the flow part, is doing the talking, but then if you don't have this turned on, the report's not listening to the talking, or at least that's how I think
Great.
about it.
Okay. Okay. Great. Okay. I'll try these in the next 24 hours. And if I'm still having issues, I'll come back on tomorrow night.
Sure.
Great. This is very helpful.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right. And I see we have Alex and Jackie who have joined. Let me go ahead and jump into our questions and see if there has been any that have come in. And David, yeah, great point. So if you hide the entire title bar, it will take away the title that you can add to it. What I've done in the past is I'll just kind of add the title to the actual form itself. But if you would like the layout of having, and this goes back to your question, Josh, if you hide the title bar, yes, you'll lose your title. If you rather have it, show the title and hide all of those action buttons so they can't be clicked, David's correct. You will have to do that through CSS. But I'm not a CSS expert, so I won't be able to show you how to write that CSS.
Right. I was also thinking you could probably add a JavaScript listener to pop something up also, but I figured that this is probably the most straightforward, and I don't have a title on my form anyway, so it's not gonna
Okay, cool.
Affect anything.
Cool. And great points, David. Thank you. All right, so Jackie, I see we have a question. So you have 3 form request solutions. You need to show the open request on one shared dashboard page. How do you go about doing this? Okay, so just to make sure I understand, you want to show 3 different categories of requests on the same dashboard?
So I have a dashboard that a user goes in, and at the top they request whatever flow they want to go down. So whatever request they need to make. And then on the other part of the dashboard below, I have what's open status that is waiting for me to contribute. And under that, everything that I've created. So everything that's still in an open status that maybe was somebody else. But these 3 separate workflows are, I'd like to use the same, like I have a workflow that they decide which request they want and they go down a different path into a different solution. But I want them to be able to use the same page to see their active requests.
Gotcha.
From all 3 of those solutions.
Okay, and then I assume that because those are 3 different requests or 3 different solutions, that you are going to be reporting on 3 different data structures.
Yes.
Okay, gotcha. So one thing that I would recommend here is if you want one page to be able to do this, you could use a tab container on your dashboard, and you can allow them to tab through the different requests to show their active ones in each category. Is that kind of along the lines you were thinking?
So you're meaning tabs at the top where they would have to choose the tab.
Yeah, so if I let me go ahead and just add one here. So you could add this, and then you could have, request A versus request B. So that way, when they're actually viewing the dashboard itself, let's see if this actually works in preview. They could flip through, and each of these different tabs would have a report container or an actual report component inside, so that when they flip through, it'll be 3 different reports that they can look at.
What I was looking for is, and that's kind of a good solution if I can't get them to flow in, like I'd like, request A, request B, and request C all kind of on the same view.
Oh, I see. Okay. So when we're creating reports, in some cases, if the tables or the different data structures are related, or if you create a relationship between those structures, you can report on 2 different data structures in the same report. But that is not something that we typically see. The reason being is, there's going to be different fields that are associated with each of those different requests. So it's going to be hard for the report to know if request A comes in, then I need to show these fields. If request B comes in, then these fields are available. And then if you have all 3 types on the same report, you're going to have a bunch of different columns that might be blank or it might be empty. Does that make sense?
Well, so it would make sense, but I would be pulling in the same data. So on that request page, they wouldn't see like requests. They would see, things like the start date and the request ID and, things that they would share and comment, so that who it's assigned to, when the last modification date, things like that, as opposed to, the plant or information about the specific request itself or the detail within it. So they would have all the same information. I just didn't know how to get them all on the same view. So if I'm master data and I'm working all 3 of those solutions,
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have to go to request A for one solution, B for another, and C for another. I want to see all my things that I have to do on the same page.
Gotcha. Okay. So I don't want to steer you down the wrong direction, Jackie. So I do have kind of an answer I can show you now, but what I'd like to do is kind of take this back to my team and kind of talk it through with them. The reason being, I am not a SQL or database expert by any means. My expertise is decisions, not necessarily the back end of it. But what you can do, kind of going back to that relationship option, if there are different fields that they are going to share, you could, and let me just go to a screen where I can show it to you rather than blab on. You could create a relationship between those different databases. So you would just give it a name. I'm just going to say example. You would pick the table, or I'm sorry, the connection string for the database you're trying to connect to. This is just my local decisions one. And then you pick the table that you're trying to create a relationship from and a relationship to. And then you pick the fields that can tie them together. And then once you create that relationship, then when you go in to create your report, typically, if you don't create that relationship, once you pick your data source, so if I were to pick account data source, if I were to go in and try and add another data source to report on, I'm not going to have that available. However, once you create that relationship, once you add once you add data structure A, and then you go back to add another one, you'll be able to select that second data structure. So that might be the best option here. Again, let me confirm with my team because I don't fully have my head wrapped around relationships and joins and SQL. But I will get back to you with a good answer. But if this is something you want to try in the meantime, this is what I would recommend off the top of my head.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? Do you want me to drill into a little bit more?
Well, so what I saw though, the fields that you were selecting there for the relationship were more the in solution data, collection data, as opposed to the outside, request date, start date, like the flow data that gets created when you run the flow. So if you can make a relationship with like the outside data, is that what you're saying?
You can do it with, when you say outside data, you mean databases outside of the SQL database that Decisions is installed to?
Sorry, I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this very well. No, so when you have you run your flow, you get your start date. So stuff that you would ask, like so your start date, your modified date, all that information that wouldn't necessarily be in your flow execution extension.
I see. The metadata that's already kind of captured when you create the different structures. Yes, you will be able to actually select the items that you define as part of your data structure, not just the Decisions collected data.
And so where would you, like I have an outside folder, and then I have some the inside folders that hold the different solutions. So if I create that relationship on the outside folder to capture that, like where do I create the relationship? Where would I create that? Do I create that as an entity, or how do I create that?
Yeah, so when you want to create a relationship, you just go to create data type /integration. And if I understand correctly, when you say folder, you kind of mean a Decisions folder, Decisions entity, if you will. Okay.
Folder, yes.
Gotcha. So this will be add relationship. And then you pick your connection. Again, I'm picking my local connection because I don't have an outside database. And then you select the two tables that you want to group together, or I'm not group together, but create a relationship between. One thing to know is when you create your own user-defined data structure, when you're searching in this table, you're going to use the entire namespace, not just the name that you gave the data structure. And you can find that namespace when you edit the data structure. It'll be on the right hand side in the properties. But just want to give that warning. But you select the structure, and then it'll show you the fields that are available. So this particular structure that I selected, this is a user-defined structure, and you can see the fields that we actually defined are available for me to select.
Okay.
Does that help, Jackie?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
And awesome. You'll let me know what you find out.
Yes, absolutely. And then, Perfect. I want to clarify one other point, because you want the ability to take action on these items, right? Not just view them. Okay. Yeah, so David brought up another really great point. So for anyone else who is listening in and they're like, oh, you know what, I kind of want to view 3 different data structures in the same report as well, but you don't necessarily want to take action on it, there is a way to use a flow to source your report data. So as David mentioned, you can do it in a flow and kind of populate the report that way. However, I do want to give the caveat that if you use a flow sourced report data structure, you're going to lose any actions that you have available. So you won't be able to complete assignments. You won't be able to use those user actions. And then we also caution when you use this, just remember every time that dashboard refreshes or that report refreshes, that flow is going to be running again. So if you're working with large data sets, this is something to keep in mind because you're going to experience performance impact. But again, if you have any questions around this after hearing this, or you're interested in diving into that a little bit more, please feel free to reach out to support@decisions.com, and they'd be happy to walk you through that further. But thank you, David. You're coming in with all the great points today. And then I see I missed something here from Alex. So Alex, you had asked what the title Josh was talking about on the forms. And it looks like I have lost Alex and he is gone. So I will not answer that question. Is there any other questions from David or Jackie?
Not for me today, thank you.
I got nothing until next time.
Okay, and then David, offer still stands if you want me to build that example that we were talking about. Happy to do that now, or I'll let you kind of explore that on your own, and you have my email address if you want to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't mind running through it, I mean, that'd be great. I have time if you have time.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so the way that I would kind of go about it is, well, let's just go to the form we already have built. All right, so I'm going to change this. We'll still work with the kind of account example. I'm going to change this to string. We're still going to use a flow to populate that. We're still going to fetch all of our accounts. But then here what we would do is we would have to loop through each of those. Oh, it's in my favorites somewhere. And then exactly what you said, we can kind of use like a merge. So I'm actually going to use the add item to list step. And then what we're going to do is build a list of strings, and the new item, I'll actually have to loop this back here. So the input for the new item, I would use merge plain text, and then I would pick, did I not set up the output name here? Oh, I'm moving too fast. I would pick the two fields that you want to merge together. So let me find my accounts here. So we'll just use maybe first name, last name for this example. So I'll merge my first name, I'll merge last name. There we go. And then I'm just gonna grab my list here. And you know how the add item to list step works, right? I feel like I don't want to rush through this portion.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. If anyone else wants me to go or into further explanation, happy to do that. All right, so now we have our list built of the concatenated items. So we'll just have to, rather than pass out this account here, we're gonna pass out the new list. I'm gonna debug this real quick just to make sure my logic is sound. I'm also a weird debugger person who loves debugging. And it looks like we have not set up, only one person has set up their last name, but you can kind of see how this would work. Maybe I should pick a different thing to merge together. What's something that's always on an account? I guess the account ID will always be there. All right, so we'll debug that one more time just to check. There we go, perfect, okay. So then that kind of takes care of merging those together, but then we run into the issue of, okay, now the output of the flow is only going to have that string that we just built. It's not going to have the rest of the properties. So I'll do merge item. Okay, we're just going to ignore my terrible typing today. We'll go back into the flow that we first built. And then on the output of this, you could use a fetch entity step. And this time you're not fetching in, or you're not going to be fetching all of the objects. This call is only going to be that single object. So I would go ahead and do account again. We are going to have to actually do a little bit of logic here to split that string up. But I'll add that step in just a moment. But the way that I would configure this is I would do field name. I'm going to fetch the account by 2 different pieces of fetch criteria. The first item that I merge together and the second item. So that way we know we're going to come back, or hopefully come back with a unique object and not have multiple objects returned. So we'll do account ID. Well, we'll do first name first. And stop me if I'm losing you anywhere. And then we'll do account ID also equals first name, I mean. There we go. So now, now we have to handle, oh, excuse me, now we have to handle the kind of splitting that string back up. So on the output, we could do split string. And then here I added a kind of dash in between the 2 items. I'm now realizing that that might have been a wrong call because the account ID kind of has dashes on it. So I won't be able to use that as the separator character. So I guess before I go too much further, David, would you have in this example, would there be some sort of character that you would be able to, dependently be able to parse the string or split the string up by each time?
Yeah, but it's
Or
usually going to be a dash though. So like the junk in our database is usually like a name, a type, and a code, right? So some of those things can be configured by the user and not necessarily auto numbered. So usually on the display, they'll say something like, well, I want the code space dash space name.
I see.
Right.
Yeah. So this might not be reliable using the split string. That's what I'm realizing now, since account ID has a bunch of dashes in it. And then you guys have no way of kind of enforcing, making sure that specific character isn't going to be used.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking you may be able to do it by like a character position, but again, that's unreliable because there could be a dash in the code. Like,
yeah,
it won't always be the first or the third or whatever.
right. And in a space, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be the first field versus the second field, because your first field could have, a space in between.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. Interesting. Yeah. Let me think that one through some. That introduces another level here. We might have to just get that feature request pushed through, because this method that I'm thinking about, it won't be reliable.
Okay. Yeah, I was just curious about that. We ran into it the other day. We ended up solving it by our because we call our database using a service, and our devs have created custom steps and decisions that basically ping the service and then bring back an object. So on that custom step that they've created, well, on a couple of very hyper specific ones, they basically just added that to the concatenation the way it needs to be to the object that when they return it. So
Gotcha.
it basically on that object, I have that as a display field option. But I was just wondering if there was a way, I guess, in that I could just do that myself in a flow without having to either involve a developer or go and have to change up those objects or anything like that.
Yeah, and there might be another solution that I just didn't think of right away. So I'll do the same thing, and I'll take it back to my team and see if they can think of something better that's reliable.
Cool.
All right. And I'm going to check these questions here. See if we have anything that I've missed. And it looks like we have all of the question answered. So if there's no other questions, I can give everybody 15 minutes back to their day or 18 minutes back to their day. And if you want, I can tell your boss that you were on the call the whole time, I promise.
Sounds like a plan.
Although, David, you are the boss, so it doesn't matter.
That's true.
All right. I'll go ahead and close it off. So thank you guys for joining and thanks for the questions. You guys
Yeah,
have
thanks for
given
your
me,
time. Appreciate it.
yeah, of course, you guys have given me some things
Thank
to think about. So thank you. All right. I'll see you guys later. Talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.
you.